Today we read Luke chapter 5 verses 1 to 11, and the church remembers the saints, missionaries and martyrs of Asia. It's worth starting by remembering that the gospel began when God became incarnate in a Middle Eastern country, and that the early church began there, spreading into Europe through the missionary journeys of Paul and others. Actually, of course, Asia has been the birthplace of most of the world's great religions. Today we tend to associate Christianity more with the West, but the church is worldwide. That's what we mean in the creed by the Catholic Church. Many denominations are represented on every continent and in most countries. Of Asian churches today, we might think of the Syrian Orthodox Church, which numbers 4 million across the world, and which traces its history back to Antioch in Syria, which features in the Acts of the Apostles as a centre of missionary outreach. Or we could think of the church in South Korea, where 29% of the population count themselves as Christian, and where many denominations flourish, including some mega churches. Christian missionaries originally travelled east to west to spread the gospel, beginning with Paul heading for Rome. Later, they travelled west to east, like Francis Xavier, who went from Spain to India and Japan in the 16th century, or Henry Martin, who went from Cornwall to India and Persia in the 19th century, and so many others. As a result, there are Christian churches in India, China and Japan, as well as Korea. I wonder if you've recently been watching the TV reprise of Michael Palin's travel journeys around the globe, with his reflections on them as he looks back over those travel adventures. I'm sure it's very good for us to lift our eyes from our immediate surroundings and gain a wider perspective of the world, to remember that our small corner is just that, very small, and that God's perspective on our geography and our history is a much bigger perspective than ours. When the disciples raised that bursting net of fish, they were amazed at God's bounty. Ever since, the story has been told and retold to represent the mission of the gospel and to encourage us to reach out in the strength of God. From now on, you will be catching people, Jesus said. And all the many manifestations of the Christian faith around the world are testament to that promise. The waxing and waning of the church in different parts of the world is bewildering, and perhaps we wish the church were always waxing, always growing. But let's remember God's perspective on this. It may not make sense to us, but our perspective is rather limited. Another puzzle is why it is that the mission sometimes succeeds and sometimes doesn't. There's a mysterious collaboration going on between us and the Spirit. And it's seen even in that fishing story. The fish did not jump into the net of their own accord. Neither did the disciples lie back and sunbathe to await the catch. Jesus told them where to drop the net. They went and did it, and then the nets filled with fish. The initiative from God, the obedient response from us, the catch, the harvest. That is the pattern which we see here and which missionaries through the ages have followed. We give thanks to them today as we pray particularly for Christians who are in places where their faith brings them into danger. And we ask courage for ourselves, courage to be part of that outreach, to spread the gospel within our own small corner, to be faithful witnesses to Christ and to the universal love of God.